have you now.
They want to mess with my droid. They're going to pay for it.
This is the way.
You may fire when ready.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
The way you're fighting, you wouldn't have lasted long.
Hello there.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
Another week, another movie. Last week, we speculated on here that Andor was going to release one at a time after the 3-episode premiere, just like Season 1 did. But that is not the case, because they are basically releasing a director's cut film every week for 4 weeks. All this among Star Wars Celebration, among May 4th, and the release of the new Tales of the Underworld series. And this means two things. One, that fans are eating super well right now when it comes to Star Wars. And two, that podcasters, the podcasting class, if you will, are being overworked and underpaid. Our voices are going ragged, our families are missing us, and it's all in the name of wonderful Star Wars TV. In all seriousness, a show as quality as this, giving us bingeable arcs every week, is a massive treat, and it is a huge value add for Star Wars discussion, because if you look at single episodes, they are obviously very meaty. They've got a lot to them. But with these arcs being contained in individual years, seeing all the foreshadowing that takes place in the first episode or the second episode of the arc come to fruition has been a big payoff, and it's really allowed our gears to turn on what's going to happen in the next year and how they're going to hand it off over a year's time frame. Because really, Andor is the show that I receive the most texts from my average Star Wars fan friends about. The ones who have maybe seen all the movies but haven't really seen much of the TV shows, or maybe they haven't even seen all the movies, but they have seen Andor and they've loved it. Everyone I've introduced Andor to loves it. Something like this show is really, really what Star Wars needs to hit its stride with the average TV viewer. And my hope is that a lot of them are watching it. I don't know what the viewer numbers are like for Andor Season 2, but I'm really hoping that a lot of people are tuning in and watching such a quality show. But that's enough about the real-world impact. We have a lot to talk about as the stakes get raised higher and higher as the rebellion comes closer and closer to fruition. So here to join me in talking about all the ins and outs, all the Easter eggs, and more is the Rhydonium respirator himself, Colin Archer.
Hey, Carter. Yeah, man, that word right there, I was not expecting that in this arc at all. You know, I think we saw from some teasers what we're going to talk about. I don't want to reveal it now, but you know, there's so many parts of this. You know, we raved about it in the last podcast episode. I hope y'all listened to that, about the set designs and the costumes, and everything about this just delivers so good. And every step of the way on this thing is very thrilling, if you ask me.
It is. It's super exciting. This arc right here is a lot more spycrafty than the rest of them, because it really lacks a lot of the Mon Mothma stuff. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to see that. But it really lacks a lot of the politics that have been involved. But they still kind of get their slower-paced dialogue through a lot of Cassian involvement now. This is one of the most personal stories we've seen of Cassian in any of the Andor arcs so far. And so we're going to dive into all of that.
And there's really a whole lot to unpack on this thing from the Cassian aspect, and I really can't wait to get into it, because you could take it pretty far if you wanted to. And because his character, we saw in the last arc, you know, just really how much head and shoulders this guy is above anybody. It's why he was selected to do what he did in Rogue One, right? And we see a lot of that in here. But, I mean, this guy is the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible character, and it's really cool to see the Star Wars version of that, if you ask me.
It is. I mean, he is invaluable to the rebellion at this point, and we see that. We see that actually play out in this arc of how invaluable Cassian is to the rebellion. And so there's, like you said, there's a lot to unpack here, and we're gonna be able to hit every point talking about Cassian. So the very first episode of the arc, episode 4, is called "Ever Been to Ghorman." The intro for this is crazy long. It's like a couple minutes long. Obviously, it's some season 1 stuff. It's a lot of the stuff from the arc prior, but it actually has no Mon Mothma stuff in it. It has got one single shot of her dancing, and that is it in the whole intro. And so that kind of sets up the arc for this not being about Mon Mothma. I mean, she's on screen for, I don't know, like a couple minutes. But I really think that's because we're about to get a ton of Mon Mothma in these next 2 arcs.
Probably so.
So the episode opens with a control panel light flashing, and already I'm making connections and thinking about it. Is this light looks a lot like the Death Star control panel. It's the same shot angle we see of when they're firing the laser in A New Hope, and it just looks a lot like that. So much so that that's initially what I thought it was. I think this is intentional, obviously. They really don't do a whole lot of these shots without having some intentionality behind it. But it's actually the control panel for the torture machine that Dr. Gorst uses on Bix. And I mean, I think it's an analogy. I think that it's its own little personal Death Star. I mean, it destroyed Bix's world. And that's a lot of what this arc is about. We touched on it in the previous arc, but this is a lot more about Bix and her grappling with that torture that she went through.
Yeah, and it's shaking her whole reality. It's super interesting to see. It's super interesting, all these scenes that you're really not expecting, like you said, with the whole Death Star thing. And then the reveal,
It is.
And the reveal with Cassian, she's having a hallucination. It must be really tough to deal with. And it's also, you know, when you're doing this rebellion thing like this, it takes its toll on you on every level. It has to. So it's super interesting to see.
Yeah, we see that, and we see that in this arc with Saw's character. We know that he is the poster boy for the rebellion takes a toll on your psyche, because he's been doing it for so long, and so we get a lot of that in this arc. But like you said, Bix is having another dream. She's having a hallucination. She hallucinates that Dr. Gorst is in the dining room of their flat. So she is holding a blaster in the dining room of their apartment at Dr. Gorst, and he's speaking to her, but what's happening is she's projecting her feelings through Dr. Gorst, where he's sitting there talking about how there's a man, she's hallucinating a man sitting in a chair, and he's dead, and Dr. Gorst ostensibly kills him in this hallucination with the torturing, or has completely wiped his mind, basically killing him. And we learn just a little bit later in the episode, but it's worth talking about now, that this is a guy whom Cassian killed on his and Bix's last mission. So Bix is going on missions with Cassian now, and she's disturbed about this guy having been killed by Cassian because she's projecting her feelings about the gray area that the rebellion lives in on the situation. That her and Cassian killing this innocent soldier, if there really is such a thing as an innocent soldier, I mean, Cassian would say there's not, but killing this innocent soldier is no better than what the Empire did to Bix. Just throwing her away, not knowing her name, not having any significance, and that's the same way. I mean, they don't even know this soldier's name. They know nothing about him, and this is disturbs Bix quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's crazy just to see how disturbed she was. You know, I mean, how long have they been doing this? This is 2 years just where we've been watching this, and it's still haunting her, right? And you know, I know we talked about in the last episode, there's the realities of war that haunt people. This is just another example of that. Because remember, most of these people are like either skilled tradesmen or something like that, being thrust into a situation that they didn't ask for. You know, if you're a soldier, it's one thing. But when you're a freedom fighter / terrorist / you know, just self-preservation and good at what you do, even the rigors of this is going to take a toll on you.
Absolutely. You're totally right. And that's what we've seen is just, you know, killing anybody. They say it sticks with you. And Cassian says more on that later on, where he goes, you know, you're never going to forget it. It's going to fade, but you're never going to forget his face. But Cassian approaches her and snaps her out of her hallucination. He slowly takes the gun away from her, the blaster away from her, and then tries to get her to talk about it, but she doesn't want to talk about it, obviously. And so we learn a little bit more that they've been living in this safe house for presumably a year now. It's their mission home base, basically. And then we pan out to see that the safe house is actually on Coruscant. So, they're in the belly of the beast now, just like Luthen and Mon Mothma.
Yeah, and gosh, I can't imagine how awful that is. I mean, because you have to, we've seen evidence of it kind of later too. They just have to be regular citizens or not. I mean, what do they really do? Because they don't need to interact with people. It's super interesting to see that. I was thinking that while watching these scenes is like, and you kind of see as it progresses, they never leave the house. It's too risky. It's strange. It's strange from a non-participant's perspective. The sacrifices people have to make.
Right, exactly. Well, and it's it contrasts starkly with how we see Luthen and Mon Mothma living all the time, which is interacting with Imperials on a daily basis. But they're not wanted. I mean, they are wanted in the codename Axis, but they have no idea who Luthen Rael is. They just know him as this Axis network. And so Cassian is an actual wanted man for multiple different crimes, for breaking out of Narkina and for the heist on Aldhani. And for being at the center of all this Axis stuff and the riot on Ferrix. I mean, Cassian is all over the place and is probably one of the Empire's most wanted, even still. I can imagine that he's right up there on the list next to Saw Gerrera on we haven't been able to catch this guy.
Yeah, for sure. That's so interesting to think of. I want to circle back to this later when they get to Ghorman. I was thinking that the whole time on this stuff.
Yeah, we definitely need to. So we're headed to Ghorman now for the first time, and this is something that is going to have to happen in all of these arcs, is the first 10 to 15 minutes of the first episode of each arc is going to be a little bit of update. It's just where everybody's at, because it takes place a year afterwards every time. And so, based on events that happen at the end of this episode, we're already going to be learning about some characters and their new locales. And that's going to happen to us every time. But we see that Cyril is now living in Palmo on Ghorman, which is the capital city of Ghorman. And so he's getting ready, he's on Ghorman, and we see him leaving his apartment using a tripwire. So he wires at the bottom of his apartment on the door, basically to see if anyone has entered his apartment or not while he's gone. And we know that this is some kind of a setup plan for him, because he's a cog in Deidre's operations. I mean, nobody watching this thinks that Cyril just took some innocuous job on Ghorman. So he's walking to work. We see that there are Ghorman protesters. There's people chanting against the Empire in the middle of the square. And he's having a conversation with his mother. It's superimposed over the scene as he's walking up. And he's just talking to Edie the whole time, and she is just railing into him about how he left Coruscant, he left his relationship.
Yeah, it's totally foreign to her line of thinking. And like the most rational people too, like, what in the world? But still, I mean, we all know why, and it's cool to see.
Yeah, but exactly, we know why, but we see that Cyril has to keep this ruse up, the same as Deidre taking the demotion, in quotes, because Cyril's is he keeps saying it's a promotion to his mother, but she doesn't see it that way, and probably nobody rationally would see it that way either. Despite Ghorman being a wealthy system, it's probably not a promotion to leave Coruscant. And so Cyril, through his conversation with Edie, begins defending the Ghormans to his mother, claiming, all this propaganda is fabricated, the Ghormans aren't bad people, yada, yada. And Edie is test case number one for Imperial propaganda just working on people 100% of the time. Yeah. Because she's just accosting the Ghormans and totally bought in.
Yeah, I mean, stuff that she knows is false, too. She talks about Uncle, whatever his name was. He used to wear all
Uncle
that
Harlow.
stuff. Uncle Harlow used to wear all that stuff all the time. And loved it, but man, they were it's just funny to see it play out.
Yeah, exactly. A change in the past, going back and being like, we've always felt this way about the Ghormans, even though we know from the last episode that that's not true. So Cyril is saying and doing all this because he knows he's being watched by the Ghorman front. He knows that his phones are being tapped, which we then see them listening in to him. And we're not yet made aware that it's the Ghorman front yet. And then Edie ends the phone call by telling Cyril, don't become too much of an individual, which is this super telling state of the Empire that just some random citizen not tied to the government in any way is saying things like that and is just such a supporter of the Empire, a buyer in of of their propaganda. And Edie's just a regular lady. I mean, we see in the second episode Bix watching a holo recording of these Imperial parties, and that's like handmade for Edie, just wishing she was at something like that. Just being kept busy the whole time by the government. And so it's very telling of the state of the Empire at this point. Something that doesn't even seem like it would be said by someone during the Bad Batch timeline, just a couple years after the Empire's formation. So the Ghorman front, we see them, and they speak in Ghor, which is a dialect that sounds like French and Russian combined to me. I don't know if you were picking up on that, but that's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, I caught the French in there for sure.
Yeah, well, and they're wearing berets. I mean, these guys are the second version of Star Wars Space France. Like, this is the French. They've already done the French Resistance thing in Star Wars before. They did it with the Twi'leks on Ryloth. I mean, they all have French accents, and they're all based on the French Resistance in the Clone Wars and in Rebels. And so it's funny to see them retread that same ground and do it again with Ghorman. But they got berets on. It sounds like French. It's just, it's pretty clear that that's the analogy that they're trying to draw here. But in the Ghorman front's deliberation, they decide to bring Cyril into the fold. They think that he can be trusted. And so, they're going to soft launch it on Cyril. But first we go back to Coruscant, where Cassian and Bix are being exceptionally careful while they're going grocery shopping. I mean, Cassian is just being super paranoid and way overprotective of Bix, that the first mention of the cashier being like, oh, nice